All right, I thought I'd take a second today and kind of, instead of teaching a solo, talk about intervals. I had a student who asked, what can I do to start off with as far as remembering music? Because a lot of people just learn songs and learn licks and don't really understand why this works the way it does. And I didn't for a little while either, full disclosure. But I found, and I've started thinking in really the past after about 3 or 4 years of playing, I started to really learn about kind of intervals and why this instrument is set up the way it is. Because you can memorize all the licks and everything, but until you kind of understand the intervals and why it's set up, it's very hard to kind of come up with new things or understand why all these things fit together. So I told a student of mine to look at this article called "Thinking in Intervals." It's a free article from Paul Franklin online. I will put it in the description below, but it is well worth a read and learning about kind of the open position and the pedals down position of the pedal steel and why it's set up the way it is. So full disclosure, I don't know if you can see my toes over here on my pedals. My A and B pedals are shifted to the right one. This outside pedal lowers my B's to be flats. It's for kind of something different. But my A and B pedals are over one from a standard setup. So, so talking about the E9 neck. So basically your root position. So your E notes are on the fourth and the eighth string, right? Those are your E's. Now that's key we're in. So now if I put it at the third fret, they become G's. Okay, eighth they become C's, so on and so forth. So what our E scale is, if we kind of go up the neck, is an E, okay, an F sharp, a G sharp, an A, B, a C sharp, a D sharp, and an E, right? Should sound familiar. It's a major scale. All right. So instead of having to, for example, now if we move and let's say we do something in the key of D, okay, that's down. Well, if you're trying to explain, if you're trying to explain to people the chords of the song, instead of having to remember, because now we're at D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. So now to remember the chords to all the songs or explain to people how the song goes, we have to remember, you know, all the notes of every single scale. That gets really confusing. And I'm sure there's people who can do it, but I know I can't do it on the fly. So instead, what we do is instead of thinking in terms of notes, we think in terms of numbers. So in our case of E, no bar, open, right? So now we're thinking instead of E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D, E, which takes me a while to think about it. I'm even using my tuner over here to help me remember. Now I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those are my intervals, and they're the same everywhere. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's all an interval is. It is a number that represents a scale tone. All right. No matter where I am, it's easy to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 instead of C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Okay, which the only reason I know that is because C has no sharps or flats. Right. So it's really easy to remember numbers. Everybody can count to 8, hopefully, rather than think in terms of notes. So a major chord. That being said, a major chord consists of the first or the root note, third, and fifth of a scale. Okay, that is an E major chord. 1, 3, 5. A D major chord has 1, 3, 5. A C major chord 1, 3, 5. Okay, it's the same everywhere. So our intervals 1, 3, and 5 give us our major chord. Now, this is called a root position. 1, 3, 5. Right? It's in order. It's very simple. Our root's on the bottom. Okay. Now, if we move it up here, okay, this is where it gets a little confusing. But now if we move up to the 5th, 6th, and 4th strings, we still have a major chord, but we've kind of flipped the script because now we have a 3rd, a 5th, and a 1st. So it's still a major chord, but the the root note is on top instead of the bottom, right? So this is our first inversion. Now if we go up here to the fifth, fourth, and third, a lot of numbers here tonight, fifth, fourth, and third strings, right? Our intervals, okay, now we have what? We have a a fifth, a first, and a third. That is our second inversion. And we also have a second inversion down here on the 10th, 8th, and 6th strings. We have 5, 1, 3. So these are all major chords, right? But they're just different kind of orders of the, they're inverted, they're flipped, they're inversions, right? They're just, they flip. So the E ninth now, well, what about all the other strings, right? So cool, we've got these. Well, we've still got these other strings. So we've got our 7th string is the second tone of the scale. Sometimes it's also called the 9th because if you extend the scale, that's 8. Okay, we have another 2nd, but we call that the 9th sometimes. So you can call this a 2 or a 9. It's usually called a 9. And that's why it's called the E ninth tuning. It's because there's these 2 9th strings in there. All right. So we've got that one. And then this is cool, on the 9th string, we've got what's called a flat 7. So whereas here's our major 7, right? If you flat that, and there's a lever that does that. But if you flat that, you get a flat 7. And that's very useful when you're changing chords, because a G7 chord that leads to a C, if you're a guitar player, one of the first things you learn is G to G7 to C. Okay, you can also go. Okay, it's just kind of a leading note. So those are the extra strings and what they do. Okay, so you've got, kind of going up the neck here, kind of. So you've got your 5, flat 7, 1, 9, 3, 5, 1, 3, major 7, and your 9. So that's the open position. Those are intervals. Now, what the pedals do is they can manipulate this position. So let's go up here. I'm going to go to the 12th fret so you can kind of see what's happening if I fret it. So what happens? Well, I don't have a 4th, right? And I don't have a 6th. And since a major scale is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, what I have to do is I use a pedal. So when I get to the 3rd interval, my B pedal, right? It goes from the 3rd tone. It raises this a half step, and that becomes my 4th tone. Now my 5th, if I put my A pedal in, that raises that a whole tone to a 6th. Then I have my major 7, then 8. Now if I didn't have pedals, I would have to go, which is a lot harder to do. You can do it, but it's hard. There's a lot more movement here. Here you can just sit and, right? So a lot easier to kind of use using these pedals. Now, what do you do? Now, here's the interesting thing. What happens when you press these 2 pedals down and you play your chords, you change the tuning from an E9 tuning to an A6. Now, what does that mean? Okay. A 6th chord has an interval of a 6 in it instead of 9ths. And 6th chords are where you kind of, you hear the Hawaiian music in the Western swing, right? You're adding a 6th tone to a major chord. So we can't do that on the open. We can't go 1, 3, 5, 6 because our 6 is our pedal. We can, but we're missing that 5th interval. But on the pedals down, we have that 6th built in. Well, when you put your pedals down, so you're changing it to an A6. So here's the thing. All these are still major chords. We have our 3, 4, 5, right? 4, 5, 6. 5, 6, 8, 6, 8, 10. They're still major chords, so our major chords are still there. However, we have now our inversions are flipped. So now we have a root inversion here at 6, because our root now is on the 6th and 3rd strings with the B pedal down. So these are our E's now. Well, there are A's. I'm sorry, there are A's. There are root note. See how I can get confused? These are our A's, right? They would be E's if we were here at the 7th fret. But for now, there are A's if we're playing without a bar. So it would be 1, 3, 5, right? That is our 1, 3, 5. Our root inversion is here at 6, 5, 4 strings. That's our root inversion, all right? Now we have our first inversion, 3, 5, 1, right? And then we've got 5, 1, 3, and then we've got 3, 5, 1. So they're still our, right? They're still our major chord groupings though. But now what we have is we have a couple of different kind of intervals around here. Now we have a 4th tone on the 9th string. We have our 6th tone on the 7th string. We have a flat 5 up here on the 2nd string. Now this one's a little different. And then we have a 6 interval here on the 1st string. A flat 5, this is kind of a, we've heard flat 5s before, but they're a little twisty. So Simpsons. That's a flat 5 too, down 1, or you can lower that E with a lever and get that too. Flat 5s don't always work on everything, right? We're not always playing the Simpsons. So one of the things that you can do to get more of a major sound out of this is most guitars will have a 2nd string half lower, okay? And that gives you a 4th interval. So now we have a 4th, because if that flat 5 kind of sticks out there. So we have this little pedal, this little move where you can lower that 2nd string a half step, right? Then your 2nd string becomes your 4th tone. Then we got our 5th, 6th, 7, and 8. So all these pedals and knee levers do something. There is a purpose to all of them. They're not just for playing licks. They do manipulate the tuning and make it workable. It's a little getting ahead of ourselves with the half lowers and stuff like that, but you kind of learn a lot of those as you go along. So I hope this kind of clears up a little bit about intervals and how they work. Like I said, this was for a student who kind of reading this without sitting at a guitar can be very, very confusing. So hope I didn't use too many numbers. I confused myself a couple times, but as you kind of get used to it, it becomes pretty easy and becomes kind of second nature. So I hope that helped, and let me know if you have any questions.